Hey, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back.
Yep. We have another guest per usual today, and another person who we've known for many years. Hi, Haya.
Hello. It's so great to be here.
I know. We're so
I
excited
feel like
to have
every week we're like, we not only have a guest, but it's someone we've known for a really long time, or a NAP super fan, or a NAP's client. Like, because when we announced that we were relaunching the podcast and that we were sharing these postpartum stories, so many women and moms and parents really reached out being like, oh, I really want to, so it's fun.
Yeah. So it's great. Hey, we've just been starting each episode off with just asking you as our guest just to share a little bit just about your family,
Set the stage.
Yeah. Like the makeup of your family, where you live. And then we'll sort of just start diving into your, leading up to pregnancy, and then with the focus on your postpartum experience. So do you just want to start with just sharing a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, happy to. So I live in Boston, specifically in West Roxbury, and we've been here since 2017, but I've been in Massachusetts for much longer than that. I grew up in the Middle East in Kuwait, and my husband grew up in New Jersey. We've known each other since 2009, got married in 2018. And we now have twins. We have boy, girl. As of December 2024, they are 2 years old and a bit. And we're navigating the toilet training.
Yeah.
That's the phase of chaos that we are currently in as a family.
I mean, I feel like the people who are listening to this, like potty training one child, they're probably like, oh shit, I never even considered like potty training.
It is a literal and figurative shit show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Oh my goodness.
Especially
well, you're in good
when
company. I'm going to do it, I think, over
you need
winter
to do
break.
It. Yeah.
I know it's time.
But it is like, especially with twins, I mean, one of my good friends here in Southie has twins, and especially when it's like a little bit, maybe the kids are a little bit off with like who's really ready for it and who's like not quite ready for it.
Exactly. Yeah. And you want to time it, but you don't want to lose out on the one that was ready for it, getting disinterested or having more opinions.
Yeah.
But you don't want to drag the other one along. So I very much appreciate good schooling systems because they're in a really great school with really supportive teachers, and it very much feels like a partnership, and we're working on this together. So I'm very grateful for that.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
I mean, obviously, we've known you for some time. We know that you getting to this point of having 2-year-old twins who you're now potty training has been quite a journey for you and your husband. Is there a place that you feel like it makes sense to sort of like start when in talking about your journey for people to sort of understand a little bit more about the context of what you all went through postpartum?
Yeah, I think the sort of intro into it is we always knew we wanted kids, and we were young and healthy / are young and healthy. And just battled with unexplained infertility for many years, including miscarriages. But all tests and stuff came back, quote unquote, normal, and no specific indications. So there was a lot of ups and downs even prior to the craziness of the actual delivery days.
Yeah. And so this just, in thinking about your journey, how long did these sort of like fertility struggles last? How long did you go through that for?
Yeah, 3.5 years, pretty much. Yeah. Multiple miscarriages, 5 rounds of IUI, full retrieval, which we were very fortunate in getting 9 embryos that made it.
Mm-hmm.
And transferred 1, then transferred another, then transferred 2, and then transferred 2. And those 2 finally stuck and stayed.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking Eloise is like over the age of 3.
Yeah.
And thinking about having her, she's 3, the last 3 years of a life with Eloise, my daughter.
And that being the same
length of time. And that being actually not even as long as the length of time that you went through this process. That is, wow, a really long time.
Yeah. A lot of doctor's appointments, a lot of putting life on pause.
Yeah.
And not knowing what the next step is. Like, at least with a kid, when you have the kid, there's assuming everything is within a normal development range, okay, potty training is the next big milestone, or like they're probably teething for the 17th time, or like
Yeah.
there's progress and you're seeing movement forward. But
Yeah.
with infertility, especially unexplained, it's just a constant loop.
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
it
for
probably
sure.
even just feeling like you're stagnant sometimes, right? Like not even
Yes,
moving forward, right?
absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Can you talk me through just a little bit around, and you may or may not, I don't know if you've reflected on this, but can you talk to me a little bit about maybe the physical and emotional impact for both you and your husband during fertility treatments? Like, is there anything that you sort of, that stands out to you related to one of you or each of you during that time?
I would say it just felt powerless,
Mm,
and it felt like a lot of controlling information. Like we were just constantly navigating who to tell if a pregnancy hit, was
mm,
positive HCG levels seemed to be rising, who to tell, who to not tell. Did it matter?
mm.
Who did we need support from? What to do to take care of ourselves? Those were our constant conversations,
Yeah.
and like how to distract oneself, but also like distract each other when all you're thinking about is, okay, what
Yeah.
time is the next shot? What time is the
Right.
next
Yeah.
medication? Oh shoot, I forgot the one. Is that the one that's gonna make it not stick? What are we doing wrong? It was a lot of like, and my husband is very analytical
Mm-hmm.
and plays a lot of D&D. So he's
Mm-hmm.
always talking about the probability and like the dice roll. And he kept recalculating. He's like, all right, the chances are for it to stick or not stick are this percent that right now. And initially I found it annoying, but then at the end I'm like, okay, what is it? What's the amount now? Like how much, what's the
Yeah.
percentage of likelihood? What's the
Yeah.
percentage of unlikelihood?
Yeah.
So it's funny how during that time you attach to certain things to
Totally.
find
Right.
control or comfort.
Yep.
And we
I
really
think,
leaned on community.
yeah. I also think you make a good point about your husband being really data driven. I feel like a lot of people can actually probably relate
Yeah,
to
for sure.
that being how their spouse works, like them wanting to like know like why they're doing the thing and the research behind it. Not, in place of it being like a feeling that you have or something like that,
Mm.
right? So I think that that's really relevant. Can you talk me through just a little bit then, like how, so when you did, transfer this second round of 2 embryos that did stick, what was then like, how did your emotional state shift from this fertility journey, feeling a loss of control, feeling maybe at times a little bit hopeless or stuck, right, to then having a pregnancy that stuck and got past probably a certain point that you never got past, and what was that impact on your emotional health? Because I feel like for some people it can kind of go two different ways, where like the worries or the same time, you're having these emotions at the same time, like still really worried because you had never gotten here before, and you didn't want to lose this again, and or maybe a sense of relief that you have gotten to this place that you've been dying to get to, right?
And that it's twins, by the
Well,
way.
right.
Right? Like that adds a whole other layer of
The acceptance,
excitement,
yeah,
worry, panic, acceptance.
Totally.
And like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you feel about having 2, but then you don't want to think I'm not grateful, but right? Like
Yeah.
those things creep in, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The pregnancy itself throughout was really difficult. I had all of the symptoms, or shouldn't say all. I had a lot of the symptoms throughout, migraines and nausea the whole time, and I also had bleeding throughout. So there really wasn't a moment. There were probably 2 weeks where I'm like, oh, this is what the
You
second
feel
trimester is supposed
good.
to feel
Yeah.
like. And then it was just back to being sick or feeling sick, and other symptoms that kept arising. And the high blood pressure towards the end was really rough, the swelling. And just I'm a young, healthy person. I'm used to being able to move my
Right.
body, to walk my dog.
Right.
Dogs, at the time we had 2 big Rotties, and I would walk them both easy peasy. And so being told that I couldn't, or feeling physically like I couldn't climb up the stairs, was really hard for me mentally, not
Yeah, of
just
course.
For
physically.
sure.
And then the uncertainty throughout of like the bleeding, and not just like spotting, like we had full on bleeding emergency room situation late
Yeah.
into the pregnancy. And we're like, one of the twins is at least like gone for sure. And the other one, who knows? And we just were uncertain throughout the whole process.
Yep.
Luckily, I mean, we still don't know what happened, but luckily both stayed and grew as normally as a twin pregnancy would have.
Yeah. And then you did end up delivering early. So do you just want to talk a little bit about that? Like when you actually delivered, you had a NICU stay, how long that was. Like, again, I'm just trying to, there's a lot that happened to you and your husband, right?
Yeah.
And I do feel like when you talk about it and lay it out, and I know that we're doing it in such like short snippets right now, and we could almost make a whole episode out of each one of these moments.
You really could, especially thinking about just what you went through emotionally.
But yeah, do you want to talk just a little bit about the delivery, them being born premature and what that experience was like?
Yeah, so throughout the whole pregnancy, as shitty as I kept feeling, they were growing normally. Every checkup was normal, every ultrasound was normal. And even if they couldn't see a certain thing or hear a certain thing, the next time they looked, it was all fine, anatomy scan, all of the things. And so for all intents and purposes, the MFM doctor, the maternal fetal medicine doctor that I was seeing was like, you could probably deliver vaginally. There's no indication otherwise. And I was like, okay, great. So I'm planning for 38-ish weeks. Every checkup we'd be like, are we still on track for that? Do we still look okay for a normal delivery? And you never know. It could turn in from a normal delivery, a vaginal delivery, to a C-section emergency. But as far as we were all informed and everything indicated that we would at least start vaginally. And then, because uncertainty for someone who likes control and knows all of the pathways, like it doesn't happen that way, especially with bringing human life into the world.
Did your husband have a calculation for
I know, I was
likelihood of a twin vaginal delivery at 38 weeks without complications?
My gosh, it's funny that you say that, because we could spend a whole episode talking about how I truly believe in 2010 he manifested our boy-girl twin children that we would get. It's a whole other story that maybe we could take offline, but it was like it was amazing once it happened and we confirmed. First we thought it was boy twins, and then it turned out it was boy-girl twins, and I just started laughing, especially like in that first ultrasound when they told us it was twins. I'm like, of course, with Tony's luck, like this would happen. So when the pregnancy got later and later, I remember having my virtual baby shower because I was too nervous to be around people. I was probably like 31, 32 weeks. I'm like, I don't know how I can go for another several months. Like I feel awful, and I'm so big, and I'm like, I'm 4'11". Like I'm not a big person.
You're a small human.
Yeah, I actually think that's an important feature to point out. You are a tiny
you are
person.
A small human.
Small, yeah. You got two babies growing in there. Like I feel like you're gonna tip over. Did you ever feel like you're gonna tip over?
Yeah, I was always uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And had the pregnancy pillow in the bed, and my husband's like, I'm really looking forward to the day where I can like sleep in my own bed and not have a sliver. And I'm like, yeah. The struggle, your struggle is real too. So baby shower, I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna get any bigger, and I just kept feeling awful. I was out of breath. I felt like sick, and just went in for my normal 34-ish week. I had a lot of appointments because it was a twin pregnancy.
Yeah.
So we happened to have a 34-ish week checkup, and I went, and I was like, Tony said that as I was leaving the house driving myself to the appointment, he's like, you looked green, like you did not look okay. And they didn't let me leave the hospital. The office was at the hospital that I was delivering at. I'm planning to deliver at, and they took my blood pressure at the beginning of the appointment and at the end. And I just remember like being in a sort of daze.
Yeah.
As the doctor came in and asked me how I was doing and what was going on. And she's like, I think based on all of this and based on the blood pressure that you have preeclampsia, or it's, pre-preeclampsia. And so you need to stay here for the next month. We need to admit you. And I'm like, can I go home, get my bag? Like, can I, just get my stuff in order, eat a proper meal before I get admitted to the hospital.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't let me leave. So I called my husband. He grabbed the bag. He brought stuff over. They admitted me. This was at 34 weeks-ish. And I was hunkering down. I was still working.
Yeah.
Had him bring, my work computer to finish up a couple things. This was a Thursday. And then from there, they were like, all right, we're giving you the corner room. I was like, okay, I'm set up. My husband set up like the Roku.
Yeah.
And I was getting mentally prepared to just be there for the next month. So 34 to 38 weeks, still planning on assuming that the kids were in the right position, still planning on a vaginal delivery, but they were going to monitor me. And then that was a Thursday. Friday felt worse. Blood pressure was not getting better, even with like whatever meds they were giving me.
Yeah.
Saturday morning, they came in for rounds.
I'm assuming they did like all the blood work and the urine test, and the result of that was normal at the time?
No, it was indicating protein in the urine at that point.
Like steadily worse each day.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't even that long because it was Thursday was the appointment. They didn't let me leave.
Right.
Friday I got checked.
Right.
Saturday I got checked again, and they came back at 11 a.m., which, I mean, as you know from being in the hospital, like that's not normal for the doctors to re-round on you before noon. And they're like, yep, nope, we got to go in for an emergency C-section. We can't see where the baby is positioned, and you're not doing well enough to go through an induced labor. So, and then it just got like worse because even though at 11 they told me to stop drinking water because I was going in imminently for a C-section, I kept getting booted and deprioritized. And so I didn't end up delivering until 11:30 p.m. Like it was 11:38 and 11:40 for each kid. So I went 12 hours without water or food, and the magnesium drip had me like shaking on. It was just such a perfect culmination of like the lack of control you have in pre-pregnancy and throughout pregnancy and into parenthood is like I just couldn't stop shaking. So that was the chaos. I was supposed to be there for a month, and it turned into 2 days. Yeah. And my poor husband, I call him on Saturday morning. I'm like, you need to get here now. And I don't even know. We didn't have everything set up at home.
Yeah.
We knew an early delivery was possible, but every indication was that we were on track.
Yeah.
As much as you can be certain of that, we knew that it wasn't certain. And my husband's like, but I just made eggs. Do I have time to eat my eggs before coming over? I'm like, actually, probably. I'm like, probably you're fine. Like, I think, because we live only 25 minutes from the hospital, so it wasn't like he had a long commute. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about like the progression of like Thursday to Friday to Saturday and how long that Saturday was. And obviously, your body was getting sicker, like your blood pressure wasn't responding and your labs were probably trending in the wrong direction. And you said you already felt like crap when you walked into that appointment. Your husband said you were green.
Yeah.
And now like
I can only imagine how swollen you
I
probably
can
were too.
only imagine like how you must have felt by Saturday with the physical symptoms of preeclampsia, like the headaches, the blurry visions. Then for all of those who are listening who don't know, magnesium is to like enter your system and like relax the body, right? To prevent your blood pressure so high. We don't want you to have a seizure or a stroke.
Yes.
And in doing so, it makes you feel like a fucking wet dish rag.
Yeah.
Like hot, gross, nauseous, and you already feel like crap.
Yep.
And now you're being told you need a C-section when you were planning.
Well, you can't eat or drink up magnesium anyway.
Well, you can't, but I'm not just like layering like all the shit that you went through before just having a major surgery of twins.
Totally.
So it's like just thinking about, and we'll go into like delivery and going home, but like already like the disadvantage, I guess is a bad word, but like the disadvantage that you're sort of at now to like deliver and physically and emotionally take care of 2 babies. It's just like, wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah. So you were delivered at 34 weeks. How long were the babies in the NICU for?
Almost a month.
Okay.
And they had some initial breathing challenges, but for the most, and Luna came out of the womb like moving weird, and they were freaking out about it, and did a like neuro exam and stuff like that. But that's just her. It turns out she's just literally has not stopped moving since probably inception, to be honest.
That's really funny.
It's really funny. It's funny how those things are like personality inherent versus, but yeah, so they were just working on, I forget the term for it in the NICU, but like the 3 standard things where feeding on their own, breathing on their own, which they got, and then weight gain, I think is the other one.
Yep.
And it just took a while because they were so little. They were
I mean, a month isn't, I feel like a month isn't too bad, just because I feel like I'm sure they gave you this milestone too. Like, I feel like the milestone they usually give you in the NICU, for better or worse, depending on if you hit this, but is like, you know, anticipating being in the NICU until about your due date, right? Like, it is the typical standard. Okay. So now I want to just, you know, take the remainder of our time here to sort of focus on this postpartum period for you and for your husband. So tell me a little bit about that and what this was like for you and your husband, and what it was like having the babies in the NICU and managing that, but then getting them home, and what that transition home looks like, and where you feel like the hardest parts in that transition were.
I mean, all of it was hard. I don't even know how to sugarcoat it. It was all, I kept saying the first year, throughout the whole first year, especially the first 6 months, but really the first year, it was the hardest thing I have ever done and hopefully will ever do, because I cannot imagine, I can't imagine anything harder than what happened. So luckily we had built a really strong medical and doctor oriented community. And we are very much like, listen to the professionals, like if they say everything's okay, then everything's okay. So we had those consistent checkups with our family practice that helped. And then the nurses coming home for the post NICU program, and then the feeding specialists helping us along the way. But it was interesting because my husband is a pretty relaxed person. I'm the like quote unquote more intense one. And what I should have realized, but you know, you can't because these things are subtle, but I should have realized that you're in it. Yeah.
Right.
After what we just described.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Plus the global pandemic was happening, you know, throughout the trying to get pregnant.
Let's not forget that.
Right.
Let's not forget that. So while I was pregnant, my husband was like exhibiting a lot of OCD type tendencies that were, I mean, he's particular, but we're both particular. But this was like overhaul, like wanted to overhaul the house and get rid of stuff and make room, and all of that logistically necessary because we were bringing 2 more people into the house, and we already had 2 dogs and my brother-in-law living with us. But there was an intensity to it that now in hindsight needed some attention.
Okay, great.
So yeah, the OCD tendencies in hindsight should have been a trigger or an indication. And we had talked a little bit about postpartum depression in the non-birthing partner ahead of time, but like you can talk about things as much as you want until you're in it and sleep deprived.
Totally.
Like it's impossible to navigate.
Yeah.
So in terms of hardships, I think the peak piece was just how exhausted we both were, out of our element we both were once the babies came home. The NICU piece was a blessing in the sense that like neither of us had babysitted. We had never changed a diaper prior to this point. So like having that support system in the hospital was amazing.
Yeah.
The hardest part for me there was not being able to drive myself, like having to wait for someone to be available, or just having to figure out like what the best time was to go and how long to stay, and the guilt and the pumping and the whatever, and just like literally feeling so physically exhausted all the time.
Yeah.
And recovering from major surgery. So the NICU part was okay. In comparison to when we brought them home. My husband's a night owl. Normally he operates really well, normally on very little sleep. He always has been that way. So we were like, great, he'll do the night shift. My mom at that point had made her way from Kuwait to Boston. So it wasn't like she could be here in a couple hours. Like, you know, she needed a bit of a heads up. And we were a month early. So she made her way and was available. So she and I were going to tackle the days, and Tony would tackle the nights, which would be a couple feedings. And we had like some setups that allowed it so that we could feed them both at the same time with one person.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was like chemical exhaustion, a whelm, all of the above, but
Right.
it got to a point where he was not able to be in the room alone with one or both babies. It was just too anxiety inducing, panic inducing. He just constantly felt like he was going to harm them, or I don't want to speak for him, but it felt like he was just anxious that something was going to happen to them on his watch.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can all relate to those intrusive thoughts. And it's like, you're not going to act on them, or you know that they're not real, but we all have them. Like everyone listening can relate to those thoughts where you're like, what if?
And it creates this panic, like this complete panic where you can't think clearly or rationally.
Yeah. So he was exhibiting symptoms of OCD, which falls into a category of more of an anxiety disorder than depression. Was he also experiencing depressive symptoms, or was it mostly this OCD with anxiety?
I think it was both. I mean, we both like are on psychiatric meds, and he has had a therapist, had a psychiatrist. So we're not like we're in the know about these things, and we're already medicated. But so I don't know if some of that was helping him with the depression as it was, since he was already taking it, and so the anxiety was the thing that wasn't being addressed from a chemical perspective. I don't know, not a doctor, but it was all consuming. It was like lots of tears, lots of like feelings of, can't do this. Yeah.
I think that's such an interesting point though for you to say, and I appreciate you being so candid about the fact that you both were already on meds prior to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
For mood disorders, because it was still really hard for you to navigate this, even with a support system already in place for a known history. Right? Yeah. So I think this is such an important piece to this, where this was so challenging for both you and him. And to your point, like, even though you are educated in this, you have a background in this, you have people who are already helping you with this still felt like it came out of nowhere. Like you both were surprised by this, right?
Yes. We knew it was possible, and it was still tenfold harder than we could have even imagined. Right. And I'll add, earlier I said that we have a really great support system of doctors that we've created over the years. And that's inclusive of a couples therapist we've been seeing since before we were married. We've been seeing her since 2015. Wow, that's awesome. And we got married in 2018. So that's like part of our, and it's not every week all the time, but now it is. Since we've had the twins, it's been every week.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll add that this was like perfect storm to when the kids were born. His therapist, his personal therapist, who he'd had for many years and liked, which we know is it's a feat in and of itself.
Yep.
Had a stroke or something and ended up on basically she passed away 6 months after the kids were born.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, and so he all of a sudden did not have a support system. And so luckily our couples therapist, because she had known us for so long and also understood the gravity of the situation, she became available to us because the kids were born in September. So by this point, he had been 2 months without his own therapist.
Wow.
And the intensity of everything, plus his grad school program intensity.
Right.
And so it was December and the holidays, and our couples therapist made herself available to us, which was life-saving. Yeah. Literally life-saving.
Yeah.
Can I ask you more about the timeline of it? Because we're talking about him not the symptoms of feeling worried about being left alone in the room with the twins, and you have these providers in place, but I'm still over here thinking, you're in it. You're in it. You just had a C-section. You're trying to take care of the twins. Was there a period of time that this went on for where all of a sudden it was maybe it was a snowball getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and you were like, wait a second, this is going on? Or do you feel like you caught it sooner because like of your providers? Because I just want to highlight too, or make it real out there for people listening, that again, like even as a medical professional who does this for a living, when I struggled, that went on for a while. Like, something can be right in front of your face when you're postpartum, but you can't see it because you're so tired and you're like trying to take care of yourself. You're trying to take care of your babies. It's like, it's hard to show up for anyone else, really.
I think I personally was operating on a year and a half throughout, like for a year and a half, I was just operating on fight or flight adrenaline.
Yep.
And had my own therapist that was new because there were some changes. And so I told her, she's like, what do you need from me right now? I'm like, I just need someone to be paying attention to make sure I'm okay while I figure out the shit show that's happening.
Yeah.
And from the perspective of, I think we noticed, Tony and I are both very reflective, self-reflective, and we've known each other for so long that we kind of know each other's coping mechanisms, or just like what's normal on a given day, whether you're normal stress or otherwise. So I think that helped. And then I think it was just when you have twins, everyone needs to be on deck. Everyone needs to be on deck and ready to go. And if you can't, it's very immediately evident. And I'm not just talking about like me or him or both of us. I'm just talking like it's constant chaos.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's constant crying. It's constant, like you need to be doing something at every single moment, even if you have them on the same schedule.
Right.
Even if you have them on the same schedule and wake up
do.
asleep, there's always something to do.
Yeah.
And because they were in the NICU, we were also pumping and breastfeeding. And then we didn't even get into like they started having feeding challenges and losing weight, and we needed to get into formula. It was a whole, yeah. Did that answer what you were getting at, Emily?
Yeah. I mean, I think what I really wanted to know, is more on that timeline, because you could hear this and think like maybe you caught it that first day, like home with the babies, and you're like, ooh, you're off, like we're gonna notify someone. But really, when we started the episode, you talked about even just like how hard the first year was. So I think for me, letting people know that I guess it's okay to be living in something and maybe not even see it too. Like sometimes we might feel even guilt, like looking back and being like, how did I miss that? Or how did we live like this for so long? But the reality is, in taking care of twins, I have some other twins in my life for my family. Like you are doing something all the time. Like you're so in it. And I think that's just what I wanted to remind people too.
Yeah. And even like, could we have caught the OCD and highlighted it when I was still pregnant and got him medicated? And would that have made things easier?
Yeah.
Like probably not. And maybe, I don't know.
It's hard to think like that too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You had mentioned before we started recording the podcast that in navigating some resources for yourself or your husband, that it was hard to find resources.
Yeah.
And I was just curious, in navigating that, what did you find most helpful for you and for your husband? Or maybe, again, I don't necessarily want you to speak for your husband, but how maybe would he answer that question too?
Yeah, for him, it was a lot of community, like community support.
So telling his friends what was going on, them checking in on him regularly.
Or was it a friend noticing like, actually, dude, are you okay?
Yeah.
I think it was a lot of me saying, hey, I'm okay. Like, I think, we thought I would end up being with postpartum depression because I have a family history of it, but I'm okay. And I have a therapist saying that I'm okay and I'm handling things well. So let's just assume that I'll keep things afloat. I need help with these things. And one of those things was I need other people to make sure Tony's okay, so that he can then show up for us in an okay way.
Okay.
And so then he did this, which I think is amazing. He created a group chat with all of his friends that are either in friends and family. My brother was on there, that were that were either night owls or in a time zone that meant that during the nighttime they would be awake. So like we have a friend in San Francisco or Vancouver. My brother and their partner were in Thailand at the time. So just like 12 to 15 people in this chat. And whenever Tony felt like his mind was spiraling and he was, spinning, he'd just call the group chat. He asked them for permission to add them to the group. He would call this group chat, and whoever was around, and it was usually at least one person, up to 3, 4, 5 people. Sometimes they would distract him. They would talk about either what he was going through or just talk about like something else entirely.
I have like chills on my arm about this.
That's amazing
that like people showed up for him like that.
Was it a combination of men and women here, or was it all men? It was a combo of men and women. Amazing.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And it was a combination of people with and without kids. It was really like kudos to him to have the self-awareness to set that up.
Realize that was a time of day that was hardest for him, and when things got really bad. And usually was when you were sleeping, right? So
it highlights the village again.
Yes.
Looks different, and it could be people in other countries or time zones showing up for you,
right, or stages of
on
life,
a text or a phone call. Like this is just, again, reminder that the village, it looks different. You gotta make it.
And then the other piece was the social worker at the hospital. She was absolutely incredible, even after the kids were discharged. In just sheer panic and not knowing what to do, we reached out to her, and she got on the phone with us and talked to us for like an hour, and then gave us resources, which, full circle, this is not what I brought this up, but was how I ended up in contact with you both.
I know. I actually still remember the day that we did a call about nursing care. I was the one who did it with you. And I still remember that day.
Yeah.
Because your story, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. There are stories that really stick out to me. Your story was one of them. Yeah, it was you. You and Tony are incredible, Haya.
Both
with
really
how you
are.
support each other, with how you support yourselves individually, with what you've done for and with your kids. Like, truly incredible what you guys have done. So
thank you.
I hope that part of your reflection together and individually has been how far you have come, and how where you're at is truly a direct result of how you show up for yourselves and for each other. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Means a lot.
It's amazing. Were there, beyond we just, and you've sort of alluded to this already, Haya, around, we've been typically asking people about resources that have helped with specific scenarios that they've been in, beyond the social worker and the resources that your husband created for himself. Were there other places that you all had turned or found really helpful in terms of resources? Either, again, navigating, maybe it was the twin pregnancy or NICU stay, maybe it was either one of your mental health concerns or histories. Was there something that you found helpful?
Yeah, the social worker also connected us with a psychiatrist that ended up seeing Tony to reevaluate his meds, and the medication adjustment was an overnight immediate godsend just to create clarity. And it was temporary, like he was able to eventually wean off of it, but for that intense period. And so the fact that we were able to get a psychiatrist appointment that quickly was in and of itself, in this day and age, a miracle. So that was helpful. And then, because even though he was on medication, we were like, what else could a psychiatrist do? Like he spent years getting this concoction together, and it's working, but now it wasn't working. So what do we need to adjust?
Right.
The other piece was there's this organization that I volunteer with called All Paths Family Building, formerly Resolve New England. They just rebranded, and I went to their support groups religiously. And a lot of the people that it was a group, they have tons of different groups on different topics for different types of family building processes. For me, I was in the expecting after infertility and loss group. And then once we delivered, we migrated to the parenting after group. And Tony came to those sometimes, but mostly it was me. And that became my safe haven of just being able to talk very real about what we were going through and what I needed help with, and just to have other people who had gone through the anxieties of infertility. compounded with now having these babies and it being just absolute chaos and the hardest thing. And like, why do people do this? I do not understand how so many people have babies and live to see it the next day and not lose their mind. But here we are, we keep doing it. But that's what I was thinking. I'm like, is it worth it? I don't know. It doesn't feel like it right now. And yes, my kids are perfect in every way and also a pain in the ass.
I do think it's important to note too, Haya, that this journey has also brought you to creating your own business and your own support groups for families going, in particular, the parents of twins.
Mm-hmm.
So what I love about what we're doing with these podcasts is that many of our guests are saying, like, I'm even a resource for people, right?
Yes.
And a lot of our guests have actually been like a resource for people just in a personal way. Like, this is something that I've been through and I'm like happy to talk to anybody who just like needs somebody who's been through this. But in addition to that, I feel like you also have the groups that people can engage in as well. Do you want to tell us?
And for both parents, by the way, which I love.
Yeah.
I love that.
So do you want to just talk a little bit about that business and those groups too?
Yeah, I would love to. So, because of what I experienced through All Paths with the infertility support groups, and because of the small moments of compassion, hands-on help that people showed me while I was in this fight or flight flurry over the first year, like strangers.
Yeah.
Either who had twins or nannied for twins would just like, let me help you. Let me hold your baby for a second if that's okay. Just little things like that inspired wanting to start a business called Our Gathering Place, which I started earlier this year. And that provides support groups for parents overall. It'll expand, but for right now, it's parents of multiples because it's a culmination of all of the different pieces that I wanted but didn't have.
Yeah.
Or little moments that really made tenfold a difference in me keeping my shit together and our family staying alive and okay.
Yeah.
And so so these are an opportunity for us to bring people together to find that support in a very inclusive space. And that was one of the things Tony and I struggled to find. We didn't find it. We didn't find a space that was truly for birthing parent and non-birthing parent. It was either a men's support group or a mom support group. And, sometimes the mom support group would allow for the other parent to be there, but it wasn't he wasn't the focus.
Yep.
Right.
And there's space and room for all of the different types of support. I just didn't feel like we had the exact type that we needed. So through Our Gathering Place, I want to and have been creating those spaces for parents.
I love that.
Thanks, Haya. I mean, we'll link your business. We'll link some of the other resources that you mentioned as well in the show notes. Is there anything else that you'd want to add before we wrap up here, or you feeling good about?
You really took us through
the journey.
Here.
I feel like I took you through the little pieces
but it all is important in knowing each little piece.
Yeah. I'd be happy to chat all things chaos of twins with folks, and then wanted to shout out the Keeping Pace in West Bridgewater. It's a storefront nonprofit that the two owners have triplets and they met in the NICU. Really cool story. They have support groups for twins and triplets, mostly for the moms. And I wasn't able to go to those, even though I really wanted to, because it was a 45-minute drive. And by the time I could get the kids in the car and there, it was not possible.
Yep. Understood.
But I leveraged them a lot to safe place to get out of the house, and know that someone was going to help me with my kids once I got there.
Yep.
And then also they give out free diapers to parents of twins and multiples, and they give out formula as well. And so if you need any food or formula, and that was critical for us during the feeding challenges, we were able to get a bunch of cans of formula, saving us a lot of money during that time. So want to shout them out too.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Haya.
Thanks, Haya.
I really, truly so appreciate you just as a human.
Thank you.
But also just you really being vulnerable and open to sharing all these different parts of your journey. I know there weren't many parts of it that were easy. A lot of it was hard. So for you to just take the opportunity to be able to talk about that and connect with other people who are maybe experiencing parts of your journey or all of it. It's a testament to you and to your husband, of how far you all have come. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on and sharing.
Yeah, it's truly
Thank
been
you.
like an honor and a pleasure being able to know you and Tony, and also like just through naps and your family. So we're so proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad that both of you are Boston based, that this is not just a virtual relationship.
Yeah.
It makes the world and the resources feel closer.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Haya.
Thanks
for being here. All right, everyone. We'll be back again next week with another story.
1 second. Haya, it just needs to upload.